If you're an IT team that wants to use Jira Service Management, let me show you exactly how to get started. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create a brand new space. We can do that by going to the spaces on the sidebar and clicking the plus icon. Now I like to skip all of this and scroll all the way to the bottom and go to Jira Service Management, just the product that I need. Because the rest of these are just basic templates. And I'll tell you a little secret, all of these are actually the same. So if you click on the Jira Service Management product and you click on blank space, or you click on sales, or you click on IT, they actually all do the same thing. The only difference is the pre-templated builds are just the blank space with some stuff built on top of them. And usually you'll have to go through and remediate, clean some of those up. So I like to start blank. That being said, if you're new to Jira, you could try out the IT service management space or general service management just to get an idea of how it works. And you could always start from scratch once again. Now, I'll show you a trick in just a moment, and something that a lot of IT teams miss when they're actually setting up their queues and working on tickets. I'll show you that in just a minute, but once you click blank space, you can name your space, get it all set up, go through the process, and you'll land on something that looks a little bit like this. So I have IT support. I'll go into the three-dot menu, the action menu, and then we'll go to space settings. Now, this is where we could turn on and off the features and change literally everything else about what we're doing inside of this service management space. So we'll go into the features tab, and I'll run through really quickly which are great for Jira Service Management with IT teams in particular, and which you kind of may not need, and which you could probably grow into eventually. Now, workforce management is great. I like to turn that one on. The multi-space work is also great, especially if you have like development teams or you want to share and do more complex reporting, highly recommended. Surveys are sometimes good. If you have very specific surveys that you want to send out, there's other kind of NPS scores that you could use in Jira, but this is a little bit more of an expanded version. So if you want to do something like that, you can enable. Journeys, I'm on the fence about. It's pretty much just automations, but I would leave it disabled probably for the next couple of months until there's a little bit more functionality around it. Then we come to the work categories. This is probably the biggest thing that you'll need to tweak within your actual space. So these are essentially the types of requests that come in. So you have service requests, which someone essentially needs something. You have incidents, something happened, someone needs a problem fixed. A problem, which is essentially reoccurring things that may be happening. Change management, which is anything that you're changing that might have an impact. And then post-incident reviews. I always recommend starting at least with service management and incident. Those are kind of your two that you would always toggle on. Now, problem management, I generally don't suggest using all that often unless you have a very clear use case for it. Otherwise, it kind of just ends up muddying up Jira a little bit. But if you have a very clear-cut problem management setup and you want to manage how problems are dealt when multiple incidents arise, you can use that. Same with change management. I do love the change management implementation in Jira. I think it's by far the best in the industry. But that being said, if you don't have a very clear-cut change management process, you don't really need this. So I'd leave it off unless you do want to use this or have a very clear process. Services is great. Actually, all of these in the operations, either toggle all of them on or toggle all of them off. But this is like your on-call type stuff, alerts for any kind of outages. If you have those major things, toggle all three on. If you don't, leave them all off. It'll clean up Jira a little bit. I actually like to turn this one off. These suggestions aren't super relevant for me with the similar work. And you can see that something just got cleaned up in my side panel, which means less to worry about, less to configure, and a simpler Jira, which is always good. Then we have similar request panel. I would also turn this off. Again, doesn't quite catch, I feel like, what I need. Customer sentiment analysis, this is what I was talking about with the other scores. I like to leave this one on by default. It gives a simple star rating on the portal for end users to just submit and actually give you some kind of response based on how good your service has been. Playbooks I also don't really use right now, but you could play around with it if you'd like. Automation suggestions, none of these have been good for me so far. I have them enabled just to see kind of what is going to be suggested. Maybe these will get better, but I think I'd leave them off for now in a production environment. And then we have a couple of open features that I would probably try out if you're interested, if you want to read through them, see what they are. Otherwise, you could skip them. Okay, so those are our feature setups. Now, when we start to use Jira and we enable all the features, we have everything set up, by far the most important thing we need to configure correctly is our portal setup. Now, the portal setup matters a lot because the portal allows us to collect more information than, say, an email would, while being able to help our agents, our team, resolve work faster. So if someone emails you and says, my laptop is down, you have zero context. But if they go to the portal and you say, well, describe what's down, describe what happened, when did it happen, what kind of laptop do you have the context you need to actually resolve that. So to set up our portal, and the portal is always on. It actually never turns off in Jira. You can technically avoid using it if you'd like, but there is inside of the channel and self-service a little portal tab. Now you could go in here, name your portal. There's a little link in here, and you could go and check out your portal and what it looks like today. So I'll just open up a new tab, take a quick look. So this is my portal here. Cool. I could go in here and start configuring my portal groups to categorize. I would keep these at a super minimum to make things very simple for end users to actually read and understand. Otherwise, reading through 10 groups with 5 work items per group, if you run the math on that, that's 50 types of requests you could submit, and no one's going to read through 50 requests to figure out which requests they're going to submit. So keep this very, very simple out of the box. So once you have your portal set up, you could go to your request management, and this is where we see those little features that we actually enabled before: service requests, incidents, problems, changes, etc. And these will disappear as you toggle these off. So inside of service requests, this essentially is just a type of request that is submitted. Now, a really good version of this is kind of something similar here. You have things like common requests, workplace devices or hardware problems, logins and accounts or software problems, very clear-cut portal requests that you can easily allow end users to identify and not use like complex IT terminology here, right? If you type in like incident or service requests, a lot of people are not going to know what that means, even though it sounds very clear, cut, and dry. End users may not know what that terminology means. So definitely skip that kind of terminology. Definitely skip overcomplicating this. I kind of have a motto when I do implementations with our team, with clients. We always say, make following easier than bypassing. So make this intended process of going to the portal, submitting a request type, the simplest process that you can to maximize the adoption for your company. The more complicated this is, the more friction you add, the more likely they will not use this. And that's where a lot of companies go wrong, and they set up a portal, it never gets used. People just submit Slack messages, emails, walk-ups, whatever. That is why, because this is overly complex and just too much friction to go in and submit something. So keep things very, very, very simple. A really good example of that is, here's a kind of a bad example request, right? I jump in here, I get a ton of fields, options, I have to scroll down. This looks intimidating to me. I'm like, man, I have to submit, 10 fields or something, read through all this? Pass. Here's the same exact request with conditional logic inside a form. So this would actually not be shown because I'm an admin, it does show it for me, but I do get this question right up below it, which is, what are you having an issue with? One simple question, that's all I have to answer. And then I type in either my device, system, or other. If I hit system, I get asked another question. Did you forget your password? I'll say no, but it's not working, or I could say yes or no, but that's not the issue. And depending on what I select, you can see that there's new questions that pop up that are only relevant to the selection. So it's saying, cool, which system are you having problems with? I might say like Slack, voicemail, whatever it is. I can still work while this is down, and then I can add a quick summary and submit this. That's it. That's how you want to keep this very, very simple. And if I don't use system and access and I go with my device, I get an entirely different set of questions. So instead of showing 20 different questions to an end user, you cater and only show what's relevant to them in that particular moment. That's what you want to do with conditional forms inside of Jira to get maximum adoption for your portals, which is by far the best way to start using IT or Jira Service Management for your IT teams, because then you could layer AI on top of this. You could have AI resolving requests. You could have documentation like this showing up, and end users could self-help, self-resolve. A lot of things you could layer on a portal that you cannot do via just Slack messages or email. Now, you can integrate with like Teams and Slack, the actual Jira portal experience with the AI and everything. That is something you could do. I'll save that for another piece of content, but just to keep in mind, keep the portal very, very simple, very easy to use. So back to these request types, keep them very high level and easy to understand, right? Get IT help is kind of a catch-all. Request a new notebook, that's just requesting a laptop. Needing access to Wi-Fi, VPN, report a broken asset. So that's different from requesting. Say I have a laptop, that would be broken. That would be this request type. So a little bit different, all with conditional forms and logic. So when you're setting these up, make sure to kind of follow the guidelines of keeping things simple, not overly complex, and making it very easy for end users to set up and understand. Real quick, I know this looks like a lot, And if you'd rather just have me and my team help implement exactly what I'm showing you in this video, that is exactly what we do. If you're interested, hit the first link in the description below. Now, the one thing that a lot of IT teams miss when they set up their portals is SLAs. Now, SLAs are service level agreements. And when you actually look into the definition of service level agreement, usually it's an agreement with a client, company, customer, whatever it is, on response times or resolution times. Now, this usually doesn't apply to IT teams, but I'll show you why you should absolutely still set this up. It usually doesn't apply because there's oftentimes no agreement between the end users and the IT team for the SLAs. That being said, there should be a standard that you're trying to shoot for. And the standard can be set inside of the SLA section. And you only need 2 SLAs. Really, you only need 2. You could forget about the rest. There's a lot of others you can technically set up, but these are the only 2 you need: time to resolution and time to first response. Because this will do 2 things. Number one, it will make sure that end users that submit a request, they know that you're actually on it. You're taking a look at what's going on. That's the time to first response. And number 2, they get a timely fix. So that's the time to resolution. So they're not waiting forever for acknowledgement, and they're not waiting forever for a solution. Now, I'll show you the mistake that most people make. They skip the SLA setup. They'll set up a queue, which we'll touch on in just a moment. And inside of the queue, they will sort things by priority. So you could go in here and sort things by priority. These are all high. But let's say you get 10 tickets a week, and you could work on 8 or 9 tickets per week and actually resolve them. Maybe there's 1 or 2 that kind of get left over that get carried over to the next week. Let's say Bob submits a medium priority request. Not super urgent, but something that needs to get resolved relatively soon. So we have Bob's request here, and then we have people whose high priority requests appear. And you start resolving high priority, get down to Bob, and 3 more high priority come in, you start resolving those, and all over and over and over again, you never get to the low priority requests. That's the problem that most IT teams run into whenever setting up those queues. They go in, they set them up, they think they don't need SLAs, and they use the priority as sorting, and then the lower priority work items never get resolved. Huge, huge problem, right? It's not great for your team, not great for your company. So the way we solve that is just by setting up a couple of simple SLAs. As I mentioned, time to resolution and time to first response. And then what we do is when we edit these, we can define certain time targets for each priority level. So critical would be, let's say, 1 hour time to first response, whereas lowest might be 32 hours or 16 hours, which in the 9-to-5 calendars, like 1 to 3 days, for example. So very simple, very easy to set up. You just go in here, add a category or a JQL. In this case, we're only applying this to incidents, but you could absolutely apply this to everything. In this scenario, we actually have the service requests having their own SLAs, which is totally acceptable. Usually incidents are a little bit higher priority. Since they're not a request, they're an active outage or problem. So in here, we defined all of our targets. And now let's say that Bob comes in, submits a medium priority request. It requires a response within 8 hours. So it doesn't matter if it's medium and a new critical one just came in. If it's been 7 hours and 55 minutes, you only have 5 minutes to respond to Bob, whereas the critical one, you still have 1 hour. So Bob's is actually the highest priority thing. So when you set up your SLAs, we'll go to our queues. You're going to want to make sure to sort your queues by SLA. So you see time to resolution here. You could add time to response by editing the queue and adding in that field, and then you just sort by time to resolution or time to first response. And there you go. That's how you actually set up a relevant queue for an IT team that's actually going to give you the ability to resolve every request in the right timing. Not just high priority stuff, but every request that comes in its own right timing. So that's kind of our SLA setup. For queues, you only need 3 queues. That's it. Most companies overcomplicate this. Most of my clients overcomplicate this. All you need is my open tickets, all open tickets, and then a recently resolved queue. My open tickets is, or all my tickets is anything I am working on, stuff that I am assigned to, actively going through, things that I need to close out. All open tickets is my queue for anything that is still unresolved that needs some kind of action. So once I run out of tickets that I'm working on, I'll go to my open queue, and if there's a blank assignee, I'll grab that, I'll assign it to myself, and it'll pop up in all my open tickets, and then I can go through and execute on those. So those are your 2 main queues that you're going to be working out of. The third one is the recently closed and resolved tickets. This one doesn't have anything, but the idea here is that let's say I closed the ticket last week, similar one pops up this week, or maybe I need to reopen it for whatever reason, add a comment. Instead of going through, searching for it, trying to find the right keywords or whatnot, I might have all my tickets in here from the past week that I've closed out. I could quickly pop in this queue, find the right work item, and mark it as resolved. Now, this one is honestly optional. You really only need the first two, but I personally like to have this one to just get a sense of the recent closed stuff and jump back in there quickly if needed. Now, there's a ton of other options for queues. You could set up escalated, VIP queues, just for service requests, just for incidents. You don't need any of that. You can do it, and I would highly recommend staying away from, 10 to 15 plus queues. Definitely keep it under 10 to make sure that your team doesn't get lost in what's currently being done. So keep this short, keep this simple. Queues are essentially where you work out of. So if you're not using a queue pretty much daily, the queue doesn't need to exist. This is not reporting. This is not a collection of work items to look at later unless it's very recent. And this is not for something that your boss needs to look at, your managers need to look at, or you need to look at for reporting reasons. This is to actively work out of. And these should only exist if you're literally using them every single day. Don't riddle your entire organization and project space with queues, because it is not going to help anybody. So that is our ITSM setup. Next, you're probably going to want to look at using assets inside of Jira and how those two really relate together. So I'm going to pull up that video and you could click on checking it out right here.